Well, hello everyone. It's Adam here again, and we are back with one of our podcast conversations that we do occasionally here at St George's. And today I am delighted to say we've got two very, very special guests. We've got Emma and Michael Kenyon, who, for those of you who are familiar with us at St George's, will know that they are our mission partners and they work out in Cambodia. I'm going to get them to tell a bit more about who they are and what they do in a minute. But this is following on from a visit from these guys back in June, where they came and visited St George's. To tell us more about their work so we could pray for them and they could pray for us, and part of building a relationship of support between us and them and the community they work with in Cambodia as well. So Emma, Michael, welcome. It's great to have you with us. Just, for those who didn't get the chance to meet you when you visited, do you want to just introduce yourselves, let us know who you are, what you're doing, why you're in Cambodia, how you got there?
Yeah, thank you for having us on your podcast. It's great to be here. So we are the Kenyons. I'm Emma, this is Michael, and we have two small boys, Tonle and Sela, who have Cambodian names if they sound unusual. And we live in Phnom Penh, Cambodia. We are part of a mission organization that is called the Hard Places Community. The Hard Places Community is a charity that works in different parts of the world, in the darkest corners of the world, working with people who have been trafficked and exploited or are highly at risk of being trafficked and exploited. So we specifically run a restaurant, a training restaurant, and a discipleship program with a group of young men who have come out of really difficult, dark backgrounds, and we use our skills and our experience to the best we can and partner with God, and love seeing the way that He is transforming lives and helping these young men to really understand their identity in Him.
Fantastic. And so how did you guys get there? I mean, it's not, I presume it wasn't just a job you saw advertised in the newspaper or on the job centre website. We want missionaries to come to Cambodia. How did you guys end up there?
So we both did short-term mission trips, not thinking we would live overseas. We were just visiting. So I first visited in 2010, and I was at Bible school, and I had a bit of a break during the summer and not much to do. And I heard about a charity out there working with women who had been victims of sex trafficking. And they were training the women in sewing and design and pattern making. And prior to going to Bible school, I had worked in the fashion industry as a lingerie designer. So I went out to Cambodia just for a month and got involved in the sewing and production department. And I also got to do a bit of Bible teaching, and just completely fell in love with Cambodia and saw so much purpose of how God could use my skills, and saw so much need there that I finished Bible school and moved back there in 2011.
Kind of similar for me as well. I visited for 2 weeks on a mission trip, and I'm from America, and in the States I was a chef and trained as a chef and worked as a chef for most of my life. And I came out of a season of really God. I had become a Christian. God had transformed my life in a lot of different ways. And yeah, so out of that season, I went to Cambodia on a short-term trip and just really fell in love and just saw a need there, and kind of a way that I could use the skills that God has given me to help love other people somewhere else, and to help see transformation, God transform other lives through that. So yeah, packed a bag and moved to Cambodia, and then 2 days later I met her, and been there ever since.
That's absolutely wonderful. I think there's a few ways we could keep exploring this. I think I'd love to hear actually a bit more about Cambodia and kind of and I say we use the word need, but also perhaps the opportunity or that sense as to what God is doing in Cambodia, and the part that you feel that you've been called to play in that.
Mhm. Yeah. So Cambodia is a beautiful country in Southeast Asia, and it borders Thailand and Vietnam. For anybody who doesn't know, I didn't know where it was before I visited. So understandable if you don't know where it is. It's not the most well-known country in Southeast Asia. It is a country with quite a dark recent history. So in the 1970s, there was a really brutal genocide in Cambodia where people estimate around a third of the population was killed or died of starvation. And many people were targeted to be killed. Anybody who was educated, anybody who wore glasses because it meant they could read, anybody who was in any way creative, because they were seen to be bringing in outside influences through the music industry, through writing, through the dance and of the 60s kind of era. Anybody who was any religion other than Buddhist. The government leading at that point, they wanted to try and bring Cambodia back down to kind of a peasant society. And it was a complete devastating and awful thing that happened to Cambodia and left everybody there who survived totally traumatized, really a country that had no systems in place anymore, no economy, no hospitals, no nothing. And so it's actually fairly recent history. Anybody who is my age, I'm 42, anybody my age would have been born within the first few years after the end of that genocide to parents who were completely in a place of trauma and loss and brokenness in a country in desperate need. And at that point, many Christian organizations were the ones on the ground going in and helping as aid workers and refugee camps and all sorts of things, and bringing all sorts of needs to people. 40 years is a long time now for seeing the change that has happened. And as we now see, Phnom Penh is quite a developed city. But we also see that for the average Cambodian living in a village, or the average Cambodian who doesn't have a lot of money in the city, the access to medical care, the access to education of any decent standard is really limited and expensive. There's no provision for the elderly. So it's very common to see people get into huge amounts of debt because somebody in their family gets sick and they can't afford to pay hospital bills, or they can't read the information on the hospital bills and get themselves into loans and debts that they can't pay back. And so many people in poverty get in debt for situations like that, or because of gambling, which is also a huge problem there. There's also a really dark side of the brokenness of Cambodia, which is that because of the poverty, many people over decades have trafficked their children, have sold their children to be prostitutes. Young women and young men have excuse me young women and young men have had to felt that they had no option, I guess, rather than felt that they have no choice but to go and work in a brothel in order to get money for their family. So we still see many young people in that situation where their elders of their family, their parents, their grandparents expect them to provide huge amounts of money, and they have no way of getting the money, and so the pressure is on. We also see that the opportunities they have to hear about Jesus are not always available. So many times when we get to share who Jesus is with people, it's the first time they've ever heard anything about Christianity, anything about Jesus. They're a Buddhist nation, and currently 3% of the country are Christian. And so it's such a privilege to be there and see a generation of young Christians rising up. And yeah, we're excited to see what God is doing, transforming individuals, transforming the church, and raising up Christian leaders in the Khmer communities and in the Khmer churches. We really feel like it's kind of, over the last few years, that's shifted, where it was all the foreigners leading the churches more than the Cambodians, but we've really seen an increase in young Cambodian leaders being the ones leading churches, discipling the next generation. So that's really exciting to see.
So, I mean, that's amazing. And I think there's, I mean, a lot of the guys you work with in your restaurant, your training restaurant, Michael, have kind of come out of those exploitative trades, haven't they, or exploitative arenas. And I guess a question for you guys is, I mean, how do you see God's kind of power to transform people, situations, cultures kind of emerging in such a, you know, the charity you work with is called the Hard Places, and I think for most here in Everton, we would absolutely see that as a very, very hard place to have any sense of good or transformation or redemption coming out of. So I wondered if you have any sort of reflections over what you've seen and what you've experienced there.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes, we look at when we all want to see transformation in probably some part of our lives. And, often I think we think of this as a fast process, like we want change and we want it now. And I think how God works most of the time, in my experience, is quite slow in my standards. And it's really about the long-term kind of staying and really caring for people and loving people. And so a lot of the transformation that we've seen has been people that have been around for quite a long time. And it's been through just doing that, just being in somebody's life. And honestly, through normal things, being a friend, really caring about somebody's situation and loving them and inviting them into your space, into your home or wherever that is. And through that sort of belonging, we've seen guys walk out of dark situations and kind of seeing dignity restored into their lives through that belonging and through somebody actually caring for them. And this is where transformation happens. We've seen many guys that have come, the two leaders of our organization, of our department, have come out of really dark situations, and it's been about 10 years for them. And they are now leading a whole group of young men that have come out of similar situations and different, difficult backgrounds. And they for us, will never be Cambodians. For them, they are Cambodians, and now they know the way. They've paved the way for these younger kids to come out and kind of see their dignity restored and come into, and see their lives transformed. So yeah, it's I would say it's sort of a long process of doing ordinary things with people that sound basic, but sometimes they're really, it's actually really difficult to stay and to be in somebody's life and really genuinely care about their situation.
Yeah, I think one of the things I sort of think of when you think about sort of the dynamic of sin and redemption, sin is as easy as eating an apple off a tree, and redemption is dying on a cross, isn't it? And that sense of actually things can get broken very easily. And actually, you've told that story about how this, terrible genocide, 40 years ago or 50 years ago, decimated a country, created these conditions which meant people felt the need to enter into, exploitative, akin to modern day slavery kind of conditions. And actually the journey out of that is, it is slow. And, we're still only seeing the first glimmers of that or you guys are seeing the first glimmers of it in Cambodia. But that sense in which, actually it is possible, because it's very easy to see the darkness of the world, the darkness in our own lives, and think change is not possible. And actually the message is, the message of the gospel is that change is possible. Change might not be easy. Change might be slow, as you said, but God is able to do impossible things, but God also is very patient.
Yeah, absolutely.
In terms of, one of the things about you guys, and one of the things we appreciated when you visited, is how open you were about your own lives and your own Christian journey, that actually you've gone to Cambodia, but you've gone to Cambodia with your own kind of stories of transformation and what God has done with it, God's patience in your lives. Are you willing to share a little bit about that and how that's kind of helped you in the work that you do in Cambodia?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, it's a big part of why I have hope, why I have hope that we will see lives transformed and lives changed. And, these young men that we work with will, the reason that I have hope for them in the dark situations that they're coming from is partly because of what God's done with me in my life. And today I'm a missionary, which is quite a miracle. It was a miracle just becoming a Christian for me. And before becoming a Christian, I was a chef, like I said, for many years. But the purpose for being a chef, like what I sort of looked to do with my career was to make as much money as I can. I wanted to be, have a nice house and nice cars and all of these things. This was my vision of my career. Like all great kingdoms, they come to an end at some point. And all the things I built, I lost, and I became homeless. And I lived a season of my life homeless and got into some drugs and all of that. So, coming through that, I was on the East Coast of America. I moved back to the West Coast of America and went to drug rehab and ended up going to a church. And through that, I became a Christian and saw my life transformed in so many beautiful ways. But one of the main ways that my life was transformed, I would say, is through other men surrounding me and, cheering me on and being there when I needed somebody to talk to and kind of walking with me through that season of life. I was quite lost, quite broken. And, like many of us, I wanted my life to change, but I didn't know where to start. And, a lot of that a lot of the transformation that I saw in my own life was, me being open and honest, kind of God helping me to be open and honest about where I was, about the broken places in my own heart and my own life. And, just being okay with that and sharing it with other men that then in return kind of championed me and cheered me on and pointed me in the direction of Jesus is really what they did. And through that became a Christian. And I thought, wow, this is a miracle. Here I am, a Christian. I would have never thought I'd even walk into a church. And there I was. And then going on a mission trip, and then seeing like, wow, God changed my life. He transformed my life and my way of thinking. And if he did that for me, he could do that for somebody else. And it just, I would say God just gave me a new sort of vision for life. It wasn't really all about me at that point. It was about how could I, now that my life's been transformed, how could I then help other guys kind of walk into that, just like these guys did for me. So, it's kind of one of the things that gives me a lot of hope for guys. And I think, looking at my own life and my own story, there's only, even though life is not always easy right now, having kids is quite challenging and all the things that we, a lot of times, trying to help people or part of that is disappointment. Part of that is, life for all of us is a struggle in certain times. And I think, looking at what God's done with my life in the past really kind of anchors me and I'm not going to have a day worse than I've had in the past, And so, it gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I think I love the way that you guys have spoken about, and when you were with us, you kind of had that sense of, when you're working with people whose lives may be really messy, there's that sense of like, I'm going to spend time with you because my life is messy and has been messy in the past. And it's through people, not doing anything magic, as you say, Michael, just, being there, being present, being attentive, being open, honest, that's
Yeah.
kind of, led you to where you have got to in your life, and that, having that hope for others. I wondered for you, Emma, as well. Your story from being a lingerie designer to doing this this work that you're doing now.
Yeah, I think the thing which comes to my mind to share is that when I first became a Christian, I was in my mid-20s. I was working in the fashion industry, and my focus really in life was partying, having fun, having the right clothes, being in touch with what was most in fashion, going to fashion shows, living the high life in London. And I became a Christian, and I got really stuck into going to church, and I read my Bible and I prayed, and grew a friendship with lots of really great, solid Christians. And there were many things that were really positive about it. But there was a point in my journey, probably about 2 years into being a Christian, where I was invited to a conference, a kind of Christian festival. It was called Momentum. And I think sometimes those times when we step outside of everyday life and set aside time to say, God, I'm here and I want to spend more time intentionally with you, can be really powerful. And at that particular time, I went to this conference, and the whole theme of it was about forgiveness. And I realized God showed me that there was a whole lot of stuff from my past which I hadn't ever really dealt with. I hadn't ever just laid down all of the dysfunction and the sin from my past that I had lived in. So there was a really powerful moment where I went up to the front for people to pray for me, to just lay down all of this baggage that I've been carrying and just repent. And God really met me, and I felt it was such a significant moment in my walk with him, and I felt that freedom for the first time. I felt like a load had lifted off me. I really knew that it was true what it says in the Bible in Psalm 103, where it says, as far as the east is from the west, that's how far he has removed your transgressions from you. And I no longer would go back and pick those things up again and carry them again. I think sometimes in life we do that. We say, oh, I'm sorry, God. And then the next day we kind of pick up that baggage again. But it was really a key moment for me where I left that all behind and really experienced and felt and understood the depth of his forgiveness, and that I was free. I was set free from my past, and it was just what was ahead with him. I think my time in Cambodia working with young women, young men who have come from all sorts of really broken backgrounds, whether it's through their own choice or through situations that they've been forced into, many times they carry deep shame. It's an honor shame culture, and so shame is a huge, powerful stronghold against them in many ways. And I think understanding for myself that God really means it when he says we're set free. He really means it when he says Jesus died for our sin. He didn't just say it, he means it. We can lay it at the cross and not have to pick it up again, and we can walk in a completely new way without that baggage. And so to spend time discipling people and loving people and walking with people and walking through their past, I do all sorts of inner healing arts programs, and just coming alongside people and helping them process through things they've been through in their past. I have this deep conviction and understanding from my personal experience that you can be free from this. And I believe that for everybody, not just the people I work with in Cambodia, but anybody listening, us, the three of us here, the things that we're tempted to go and pick back up and feel shame and just carry around and feel about, like, God really means it. Jesus died for your sin, and you can lay it at the cross and be free from it. And so I think that's something that I walk in and I believe deeply, and I've seen God use to help people walk free from their own baggage and burdens and past.
That's amazing. I wonder, I mean, just sort of bringing some of these things together, we've talked about, your experiences, but also, your skills, the things you were doing before you were ever interested in what God might have to say, what role he might want to play in your lives, being a chef, being a fashion designer, how those things have kind of come together in the sense that God has put those things together in what we might call calling, that actually the work you're doing now, you know, you can see the kind of the roots or the genesis of it back in your lives. And the reason I ask you this question is I think sometimes, you know, when we're doing our everyday Christian stuff, or even when we're not even sure, we kind of wonder, what's our life about? What, you know, what am I here to do? And I think, you know, sometimes people will hear the stories of missionaries. I think, gosh, those people are amazing. I wish I could be like them, or I wish I had that faith, but I don't. Or my circumstances are just a bit ordinary. What difference can I really make in someone's life? What difference can I make in the world? And I wonder if you know, have any reflections on, you know, how God has brought everything together in your lives to where you are now and what you're doing.
Yeah, I would say, you know, the first thing I would say is, like, you know, the missionary title kind of sounds like this big thing that you have to, you know, you're a missionary and you got it all together and all of that. But I just want to say that we're normal people. You know, we have kids, small kids, and you know, if those of you that are listening knows how you know, it's the greatest thing. We'll say that, but it adds a whole dynamic to life. And I think for us, we're normal people, normal family. We have things that we still need to probably lay down at the cross. We have things that we're working with. You know, there's fears that both of us have. There's you know, there's things that we still carry from our past. You know, for me, I'm not a drug addict anymore. I've been set free and seen transformation in my life in so many ways. But today I still have plenty of things that I'm walking through. And it doesn't matter if you're, you know, the pastor, the missionary, the, you know, on the prayer team or whatever it is that you know, worship director, whatever. We all have stuff. We're all normal people with stuff, and we're all trying to do the best that we can and be, you know, do God's will here on earth. That's what we're trying to do. And so I would say the first thing about skills and all of these things that we have is that nothing is wasted. You know, I look back at my life before I was ever a Christian. I remember the first dream of something that I dreamt as a little kid to do with my life was to be a chef. I had no idea what that meant. I just knew that, you know, I grew up with a single mom, me and my sister. My sister was a horrible cook. I'm not sure if she's much better today, but you know. So your
sister can write in if she listens to this. She can let us know. Yeah.
So yeah, she was a horrible cook, and I've always been a big guy. You know, I've always really liked to eat, and so I sort of, the dream of becoming a chef was built out of hunger, and you know, my sister would burn some noodles or something like that, and my mom was working 2 jobs, so we would be responsible for feeding ourselves. So I just started pulling things out of the kitchen and cooking, and you know, occasionally, I remember one time I almost burnt my mom's house down, and had to go to the fire department and watch a bunch of videos on house fires and safety and all this. But the dream was, you know, the dream was birthed out of this place. And I, you know, like I said, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what I had to do to become a chef. But when it was time for me to decide something to do with my life, I'm like, okay, well, the only thing I've dreamt of doing is being a chef. So let's just go do that. And I loved it. I love to cook still to this day. And it's something that I would have never thought that God, as a missionary, God could use that skill in my life. But it's the main thing that I use in Cambodia. And it opens the door for so many young people to come, whether they want to be chefs or not. Everybody needs to get a paycheck. And so when you open a place and say, look, I'm going to hire everybody, even if you're, you know, probably the most unqualified people can come, and we can give them a job, and I can teach them the skill to cook. And no matter where you go in the world, everybody needs to eat. And so I've seen that dream come from being a child to growing that dream and sort of taking it in the wrong direction, and then kind of surrendering that dream to God as I became a Christian. Like, God, what do you have for me to do? And him turning that into a mission. Like, okay, I'm going to take this thing where actually I gave you that dream as a kid, even though you didn't recognize that. And now we're going to use it. And we're going to use it for his kingdom. And so that's what we get to do today. So I would say that nothing is wasted. Whether you bag groceries at the grocery store, or you drive a bus, or you are passionate about teaching, preschool, or anything, whatever it is, you do, or even if you're not passionate about it, I think that God can use all of those skills that you have, and all of those experiences for his kingdom. Nothing is wasted.
Yeah, I think for me, in a similar way to Michael, I grew up being creative. I always loved art and design and anything creative. And I got to work as a fashion designer in the fashion industry. And then God gave me the opportunity to go and study the Bible. And I felt at that point that I was laying down my fashion background, the creative side of me, but I wasn't at all. God saw a much bigger picture. I think there are times in our life where he calls us to lay something down and we can't see why. And we maybe feel a bit disappointed about it. We lose a job, or we don't get the opportunity to go into the school we wanted, or the college we wanted, or we have a dream and it doesn't happen. Maybe it's just not happening yet. Or he says, stop doing this. You need to focus on a season of raising your kids, or whatever it is. There are seasons in life where we have to stop doing something. But I believe that if in those seasons we keep saying, God, I have this life and I give it to you, he will use the past, he will use the now, and he will use the things we don't even know yet, and he will weave them all together. And for me, God has done that by taking the creative skills I had, and the Bible teaching skills, and my love of leading people through inner healing, and my passion for that, and brought them all together in a really beautiful way that is still evolving. And I feel like there's no end to how much he can continue to do that. But I think a big part of it that we would probably both want to encourage people to do is to dream with God. Tell God, like, God, these are the things I do now, these are the skills, but I have this dream of seeing more. Spend time intentionally just sitting down and saying, what is it that I want to see change? What is it that I dream about? What is it that I know I'm good about, but I never got the chance to go to school and do that, or I had to stop doing that, or I have this desire to do something different, and see what he does with it. He won't waste your past, but he will add and weave more things into your future, and they'll all come together. And he wants us to be dreamers with him.
I add one more thing to that, maybe two more things. But some of the most valuable, as I'm thinking about this, some of the most valuable lessons that I've learned have been through homelessness, and through being on drugs and coming off of drugs, when I say, like, God saved me, I can go back to these places where these, like, sort of dark places in my past where, man, I was in this hotel room one time, I probably shouldn't have made it out, or I was in this situation and I probably shouldn't have made it out of that. And I think there's so many valuable lessons that God taught me about myself, about him, and about people, just walking through that. And many of us go through times like that, or similar times like that, and if we pay attention, there's so many lessons in that, in those times, even though we probably look back and we hope that our children never have to go through that, and if we could probably choose, we probably would choose never, not to go through that ourselves. But there's so many valuable lessons in all of that. And nothing, God can use all of it, and like Emma said, to he'll use it, and he'll take what you've experienced and all of that, and he'll add to it. And
I think that's a really lovely and really important thing to kind of appreciate, I think, is what you said there about God taking something and adding to it. And I remember someone giving this illustration in a talk once. They said, imagine you've got a glass of water and it's full, and that's your life. And sometimes we imagine, like, God, letting God into your life is like dropping a golf ball into the glass of water, something that displaces what's already there. You kind of pushes stuff out, and so there's your life kind of gets, part of your life gets removed, and this big thing called God comes into it. And he said, I don't think that's how it works. He said, I think it's more like me pouring sugar into the water. So you have the water, And if you take a cup of water, you can pour a lot of sugar into the water before it actually displaces any of the water out of the glass. And that sense of actually, when God comes in, God, it's not that suddenly, and there may be things within our lives that God does need to remove because they're holding us back. They're damaging to us, they're damaging to other people. But actually that sense of ourself, that God hasn't made a mistake in making you. He's not trying to make you into when we say God has made me a new person, he doesn't mean he's turned you into somebody else who's a different person. He's actually just turning you into the person he created you to be originally. And in that sense, he's adding to you. He's making you sweeter in the illustration of the sugar, and taking, the things that you are good at, and kind of, as you say, adding to them. That he's almost, you've painted this picture called your life, and God comes along and he just starts adding some shade and some detail. I think I think that's very important for everybody to hear, because some people won't have had the dramatic experiences of life, that actually they've lived quite what they might think is quite a boring and ordinary life. I consider myself to be one of those people. My life has been very straightforward in some ways. It hasn't in others, but that sense, and actually within that, there's only things that I can do for in the kingdom of God, and that's true for everybody. There's places where you are as a person, and experiences you've had, and things that you can do that no one else can do, and that and sometimes we just need a bit of help to see it. We just need a bit of help to see it. And sometimes it's through, it comes in, like as Emma described, there's a moment, a festival where we just have, we lay stuff down, and suddenly we're released into something new. Sometimes it might be more gradual. We start to see things that we just thought were lost or done, or we're never going to get back. Suddenly we find God giving those things back to us.
I think that there's like you were saying about kind of a few things about God making us into a new person, and the old person is not lost. I think that one of the things that God does is gives us a new perspective on things. And some of the things, like I was telling a guy back home when I visited last time, that that was also used to be a drug addict, that was not anymore. I said, when I look back on that, it's actually a gift. It's a gift. And he said, what do you mean being a drug addict is a gift? And I said, what's beneath being a drug addict? Why are we a drug addict? We got the drugs, and we put everything, all of our energy into this thing, and we're addicted to it. And so they often say in rehab programs that you have an addictive personality, meaning you're addicted to all of these things. Well, like I look at that today as a gift. Like God's given me a gift to focus on. Today I'm in Cambodia, a missionary in Cambodia, and I can put all of my focus on that. In a way, I can be addicted to that, and there's a healthy way to go about that. And so I think sometimes the enemy comes in and tries to steal these things and direct you down the wrong path. And what God does is he restores these things. It's not like, so part of that gifting was led astray, and I'm kind of going down a wrong path into drugs and all of these dark situations. But you see a lot of ex-drug addicts become MMA fighters, or become bodybuilders, or become something. They put all of their passion into one thing, and that's pretty unique as a person, a unique gift to be able to put all of your passion into one thing. So if God gives you his perspective on things, and you can put all that you have towards that, it really becomes a gift. And so, I think that one thing that is kind of a misperception, I know it was for me, is that sort of becoming a new person means that I'm going to lose everything I've ever been through, and have to throw away the good and the bad together. But I think God keeps the good, and he gives you a new perspective on those things that have been used for, used in the wrong direction.
Plus we can relate to the people who've been through difficult things in their background in a way that maybe somebody whose life has stayed more on like a straight and narrow. So maybe, we can relate much more to people who've been through a difficult time in their past, whose life hasn't always been squeaky clean, straight Christians. We have the understanding of what it means to not be a Christian and to live those lifestyles, and to be able to empathize and have grace for people in those struggles as they go through that process and as they learn who Jesus is and as they break up all of their past. Like, it doesn't mean it's the only way, but it's a way that God has used our specific lives and our backgrounds, along with our callings and trainings and everything, for good, to be able to see change in other people's lives and to look at them as people who we see through God's eyes and who he created them to be, and the transformation that is going to take place in their lives. We believe in it because we know it's possible.
Fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for, the blessing that you've been to us at St. George's through your visit, and we continue to pray for God's blessing to be upon you and your work as you head back to Cambodia soon. I just wondered if anybody who's listening has kind of gone, these guys sound pretty interesting. I want to find out more about what they do. Do you want to just let us know how people can stay in touch with what you're doing, where they can find out more information?
Yeah, so we have a website, and it's kenyoncovenant.com. I don't know if there's a way we can put a link in there or something.
I will find a way. Yeah.
Okay. kenyoncovenant.com. And if you can't get on our website, then you can always reach out to St. George's Church, and they can have our contact information. And we have a website with all of our email and everything like that. And we would love to hear from people. It's quite encouraging when people reach out and give us a shout. So
we also have a Facebook page, Kenyon Covenant, so you can keep up with what we're doing on there too.
We'll get the links. We'll get the links in the descriptions below. So
it's great to be with you. Yeah, thank you.
You're very welcome, and wish you guys all the very best as you head back to all that Cambodia has for you when you return.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys, and thank you everybody for listening. And we'll be back with more podcasts and sermons and all the rest in the coming weeks. Bye.